The Winnipeg Jets are the worst franchise in NHL history. Now, I'm cruising YouTube like I normally do, and I come across a video in my hockey algorithm saying the Winnipeg Jets are the worst franchise in NHL history. And what I suggest you do is go have a quick watch of this video. It's a brand new YouTube creator, and I love our fellow YouTube creators. I give him a lot of props on the video editing. I give him a lot of props on getting his face out there. Well, at least his voice out there. I give him a lot of props in his ideas. And what he talks about in the video may not entirely be wrong, but you're gonna have to stay tuned here, Jets fans, because you know I'm a little bit biased and I'm about to shed some light on the Winnipeg Jets franchise right now. Now, I want to rebuttal because I have seen these takes, comments, quotes all over the place, and the simple fact of the video that came out from Wilder42K is sound in logic to a point. He basically states that the Atlanta Thrashers Winnipeg Jets franchise, as they are tied together as the NHL likes to do, rank as the worst franchise in NHL history based on regular season standings and contribution to the playoffs. He also goes on to note some of the key players, including the Danny Heatley incident and a few other key spots, but I want you to go watch that video and support another content creator out there. So go find him, smash, hit the thumbs up for him. I normally tell you to hit thumbs up for me. Go hit the thumbs up for him. He's trying his best. I like what I see out there, and maybe one day he'll pass Coach Ryan D. So always share the love out there with other YouTube content creators. This is a really hard gig, let me tell you. But back to the core root of the issue. Are the Winnipeg Jets really the worst franchise in NHL history? Well, let me give you a take of someone living here in Winnipeg. The NHL may tie us together with the Atlanta Thrashers. They may tie Winnipeg Jets 1.0 together with the Arizona Coyotes. There may be two Winnipeg Jets franchises technically out there, but it's all a bunch of crap. Go to a Winnipeg building, look up in the rafters, and you know what you won't see? Anything to do with the Atlanta Thrashers. No jerseys hung of Danny Heatley, no Marian Hossa, no Ilya Kovalchuk, no sharing, no representing in the Atlanta history. The only thing that has ever carried over in the city of Winnipeg has been game totals from ex-Thrasher players that came over to the Jets, such as Blake Wheeler, because we like to celebrate monumentous occasions like 900 games. Winnipeg Jets fans also celebrate the Winnipeg Jets 1.0 franchise, which happened from 1979 up until their relocation in 1996 down to the Phoenix, Arizona area and became the Coyotes. Now, that is an interesting piece of history, and previous to that, we have our WHA history. I'm going to cover all of the history of what Winnipeggers consider the Winnipeg Jets, and we're going to go ahead and put this to rest as to whether or not Winnipeg is the worst franchise in NHL history. Okay, so the first place we're going to go over here is we're going to go to NHL.com. We're going to take a look at their all-time regular season standings, and we sort it by point percentage, how many points you've gotten since you've been a franchise. You know what? Playoff victory and Stanley Cups are one way to separate it, and we'll do that shortly, but another way to separate it as well is regular season points, because not all teams win cups, and we know cups come in bunches. Hello, Montreal Canadiens, who own most of them. As you scroll down, you'll be unsurprised to see that Vegas actually ranks number 1 in points percentage, but they're pretty new, and then Montreal comes in at number 2. But as we scroll down here, we actually see the Winnipeg Jets coming in at rank number 25. Yes, the Seattle Kraken are here on the bottom, and Winnipeg Jets 1.0 are over here on the bottom in the Arizona Coyotes area. But you'll notice these little blue arrows here, and what these little blue arrows denote is teams that have histories. So when we come down here and search the Winnipeg Jets, we can see the Winnipeg Jets and the Atlanta Thrashers get broken up. Why do they do this on NHL.com? Because people normally don't care about the previous city. When we take a look at Winnipeg, they've played 558 games, and they actually have a point percentage of 562. 562 since joining the league. That absolute hot garbage dumpster fire of an organization that was Atlanta, that had no prospects, bare cupboards, weak NHL talent with the exception of Blake Wheeler, Dustin Byfuglien, Andrew Ladd, and Evander Kane. A bunch of names that ended up washing out, and a 5-year rebuilding plan by Kevin Cheveldayoff that saw him piecing out what was left of the Atlanta franchise, bringing in draft picks and hitting home runs with guys like Kyle Connor, Mark Scheifele, and even Jacob Trouba, although he left a bit of a sore spot in Winnipeg when he departed to New York. What you'll notice is that 562 would actually put the Jets right near the top, but if we're going to be fair and we're going to break out teams by the city, we should break out every team by the city. For instance, when we take a look at Calgary, the The Atlanta Flames are in there at a 506. They did a little bit better than their cousins, the Atlanta Thrashers. The Colorado Avalanche get the boat anchor that was the Quebec Nordiques. And I only say that because Quebec and Winnipeg are tied together like this, and I'm going to go into the history, so don't get too charged up yet, Nordique fans. I'm going to go into the history in this video as to why the Winnipeg Jets and Quebec Nordiques were basically screwed when they entered the NHL via the WHA expansion. Don't worry. So I've gone ahead, I've plugged it into Excel, I've broken up all the teams by their expansion, and looky there, the Winnipeg Jets actually rank number 7 in overall regular season performance across the NHL. And before you guys come at me and take a look and say 858 games is not a large enough sample size, nope, that's not how it works in statistics. Of course, the larger the sample size you get, the closer to the middle, median, or average you're going to get. But at the end of the day, 858 is a large enough sample size for us to say they've done some good things, especially when you consider the first 5 years and the dumpster fire that was Atlanta coming over. Any team that is marked in red are Canadian teams, so you can see the Montreal Canadiens ranked 2, Calgary, Edmonton, Toronto, Ottawa, and Vancouver. And yes, Edmonton is that low, even though they have a billion Stanley Cups. Their regular season performance after Wayne Gretzky left ended up being so bad, and Edmonton knows this, it drags down the regular season standings. But big props to my fans out there in Edmonton, people of Edmonton. They don't ask you how, they ask you how many, and you have a lot more than most in the league, especially more than the Jets. The Toronto Maple Leafs come in at 21, Ottawa at 26, Vancouver at 31. And then if we take a look at the defunct expansion franchises, the Minnesota North Stars, 449, the Atlanta Thrashers, 447, the first iteration of the Winnipeg Jets, 4413, and yes, we claim that history as well, but we'll talk about why that is an unfair number, and the Hartford Whalers, 4438, Seattle Kraken, not enough time. Okay, so if Stanley Cups are what matter, we move over to the Stanley Cup race. We know it's Montreal with 23, and then when we scroll down, there's a whole bunch of teams here with 0, including Winnipeg. We got Buffalo, Vancouver, San Jose, Ottawa, Arizona, the Preds, the Wild, the Florida Panthers, the Golden Knights, Vegas, Columbus, and Seattle, all hanging around with 0. If we go to series win percentage, though, this is going to give us a little bit better sample size. Winnipeg, again, not found on the bottom. They're found tied with Florida. It's not an ideal series win percentage at .33, but remember, for the first 4 years, the Jets had no sniff at the playoffs. So you have to eat that in your record when it comes over. And when you take a look at overall game win percentage, Winnipeg is near the bottom, but not the worst. We got Columbus, Minnesota, and Arizona all in front of them. Okay, so that being said, we're not the worst in regular season standings. We're not even the worst if you include the Atlanta Thrashers, and we're not the worst in the playoffs regular season standings. So why are the Winnipeg Jets considered the worst team in the NHL? Well, if we pop over here to Wikipedia and talk about the NHL, by 1978 and 79, the mass majority of WHA teams have folded, but the Jets were still going strong after the season. The Jets were absorbed into the NHL along with the Nordiques, the Oilers, and the Whalers. Pre-merger league exhibitions had shown that the 78-79 Jets were competitive, if not equal, to most NHL teams, with the possible exception of the 3-time Stanley Cup defending champion Montreal Canadiens and the rising New York Islanders, and we all know how that Islanders team went. However, the Jets had to pay a very high price for birth into the established league. They had to give up 3 of their top 6 scorers, the core of the last WHA champions, in a reclamation draft. So the NHL made them pay the piper to join the league. They were also forced to draft 18th out of 21 teams in that draft. They got no top 3 pick like the Vegas Golden Knights did. And in the draft, they opted out to protect one player that ended up being a little bit wrong. Now, as we take a look at this, the Jets were based in the Smythe division of the Campbell Conference. However, after the decimated roster, the Jets finished dead last in the league for the first 2 NHL seasons. That's going to happen when you pillage one of the best teams to ever exist in the WHA. There was also a horrendous 9-win season in the 80s and 81, which is still considered the worst in the Jets Coyotes history. It stands marked contrast to the 1979 Avco Cup finalists, the Oilers, who went on to dominate the second half of the 1980s. And I'm going to tell you why the Oilers did shortly. In the WHA, the Winnipeg Jets were one of the first professional North American teams in hockey to go over to Europe and find players. They didn't just stay in Canada and the United States, predominantly Canada at that point in time. Winnipeg Jets' fortunes were bolstered by acquiring Swedish forwarder Anders Hedberg and Ulf Nilsson, who started with Bobby Hull, yes, the Golden Jet on the WHL's most famous forward line, nicknamed the Hotline. They also brought in defenseman Lars-Erik Soderberg, who would serve as the team's captain and win accolades as the WHA's best defenseman. Behind these players, European stars such as Lindstrom, another Nilsson, Kitola, and players such as Peter Sullivan, as well as goaltender Joe Daly. This led Winnipeg to become a finalist 5 times in the WHA, as well as winning the championship 3 times last year over their rival, the Edmonton Oilers. And for a short history lesson as well, what was the WHA? Well, it was an outlaw league. It was a league that came in because cities like Edmonton, Winnipeg, and Quebec would get no notoriety from the NHL. For you American fans down there that say the NHL is heavily biased towards Canada or Canadian cities, the NHL has been hammering Canadian cities, not named Toronto and Montreal, for years to keep teams away from them, to keep teams unsuccessful from them. And there was no exception in the 70s, even when hockey was booming and teams were predominantly and players were predominantly from Canada. They kept out a lot of the small Canadian cities from the country that birthed the game. So these cities that we talk about that I am from get no love and have gotten no love for more than 45 years, probably longer, from the NHL. So what did these Canadian cities do along with teams in the States like Indianapolis? They started their own league. Go west, young son, find your fortune. Is an independence and the old good fashioned grit and know-how. I don't know what is. So they started a league, they made some noise. Unfortunately, the league wasn't viable in most cities and ended up getting absorbed by the NHL. But the teams that proved their point, Winnipeg, Edmonton, and Quebec, made enough noise that they were granted admission into the NHL. The only caveat was that if you were going to play in this league, you were going to give up everything because there is no way the NHL was going to lose to an expansion team coming in. How did the Edmonton Oilers become the Edmonton Oilers? Well, the Winnipeg Jets ended up becoming one of the worst teams in NHL history in their first few years after expanding from the WHA. Well, it was a little unknown player named Wayne Gretzky. That's right. Wayne Gretzky could have, should have been, and almost was a Winnipeg Jet. It was only a matter of fact that ended up moving him over to Edmonton in some bad deals by Winnipeg Jets management at the time. Michael Golbuty, who was inducted into the Manitoba Hockey Hall of Fame in October 2017, he was an owner of the WHA's Winnipeg Jets and then ended up purchasing the troubled franchise, led them as president and governor, and organized many defining moments in Winnipeg Jets history. Golbuty did his best while in Winnipeg at a Hall of Fame dinner of all things. I was there to dispel the myth of losing Gretzky to a backgammon game. Yes, as history would have it, Wayne Gretzky would be lost from Winnipeg in a backgammon game. Or is that really true? Nelson Skalbina was the maverick owner of the Indianapolis Pacers of the WHA back in the day. The Pacers weren't doing well at the box office, and Skalbina was planning on folding the team and selling off his assets. One of those assets he had was a talented 17-year-old player by the name of Wayne Gretzky. Wayne Gretzky ended up joining the WHA for one reason. The NHL wouldn't let him join at 18, so he ended up making the jump to the WHA because he wanted to play pro hockey. On October 28, 1978, they boarded a plane in Indianapolis and headed for Winnipeg. It was Winnipeg Jets owner Michael Golbuty's private plane, and Golbuty was on board. A deal had been set. Skalbina was selling Gretzky to Golbuty for $250,000. Yes, the Wayne Gretzky. Gretzky and 2 other players, goalie Eddie Miro and forward Peter Driscoll, were on a separate jet under the impression they were also headed to Winnipeg. Skalbina's pal Peter Pocklington, owner of the Edmonton Oilers, and they too were interested in the Pacers players. Ironically, the Oilers GM Glenn Slather immediate interest was in Mio and Driscoll, not Gretzky. Gretzky's slight physical appearance was defined by the hockey stereotype, and despite recording 6 points in 8 games, he was still a bit unknown as a pro. In short, Gretzky was too small. They were unimpressed. Skalbina's deal was with Golbuty, however. Golbuty was offering cash, while Pocklington liked to barter with art and automobiles. Golbuty would not finalize the deal until he had spoken with his general manager, Pilos, who was waiting in Winnipeg. Noting this, Skalbina challenged Golbuty to a backgammon game. If Skalbina won, he could offer Gretzky guilt-free to the Edmonton Oilers for a higher price should Winnipeg pass on the deal. They played, and Skalbina won the game. So in short, there was a game of backgammon, but it was really just a friendly game that said, hey, if I win, I'm going to take Gretzky and my other players over to Edmonton. No hard feelings, right, pal? However, he still gave Winnipeg and Golbuty the opportunity to take Wayne Gretzky first because he wanted to talk to his general manager on the ground in Winnipeg. He didn't want to make the deal as the owner. He wanted to talk to the guy who was in charge of personnel. Unfortunately, Pilos didn't think too much of Wayne Gretzky, said he was too skinny, too small, passed on the deal. Gretzky ends up in Edmonton, and a dynasty is built around the great one. However, in spite of the fact that they lost Gretzky, the Winnipeg Jets were on the rise. They found players like Teemu Selanne, Tempo Numanum, Keith Tkachuk, yes, father of Matthew and Brady Tkachuk, as well as goaltender Nikolai Habibulin. The Jets had some talent. Unfortunately, they ran into a buzzsaw that was the Detroit Red Wings. They were never really able to find their footing after that WHA expansion. The Edmonton Oilers did, and the rest is history. Now, people might be asking, why did the Winnipeg Jets end up moving? This was a market that couldn't sustain players, badly managed, poorly managed, blah, 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 no fans in attendance. We hear it all the time. That actually isn't true, though. What ended up crushing the Winnipeg Jets in the mid-1990s was the fact that the average salary of an NHL player went up, and along with it, the operating costs of all teams went up. This was thanks to Wayne Gretzky. Wayne Gretzky is the reason all of these salaries ended up going through the roof, because Gretzky's move down to LA was one of the first times in NHL history we saw salaries really start skyrocketing because players used a simple negotiation tactic. I'm 1/10 as good as Wayne. I deserve 1/10 of Wayne's salary. And Wayne's salary at the time was pretty big. Unfortunately, at the time as well, the Canadian dollar was dead in the water, and cities in Canada with larger populations such as Montreal and Toronto, they were relatively secure. Teams in smaller markets like Quebec and Winnipeg were in trouble from a financial standpoint. This was the primary reason that the Jets had to trade Teemu to the Mighty Ducks of Anaheim. Oh, that one hurt. Now, the fans rallied to try to save the Jets at the time, but to no avail. It didn't work. We got one extra season out of the Winnipeg Jets, and they ended up moving down to Phoenix, but they were actually slated to move down to Minnesota. They didn't move to Minnesota because they couldn't strike up an arena deal at the time. They could down there in Phoenix. So as they moved to Phoenix, which, I mean, if you could think about this, you could have been the Minnesota Wild. You chose to be the Arizona Coyotes. That's tough. Too bad you couldn't get an arena deal done. The other thing that was true at the time is that most teams were owned by conglomerates or groups. Teams today, especially teams like the Winnipeg Jets and likely your team back home, are owned by single owners, and these single owners have what we call vertical integration, meaning they don't just own the team, but they own the real estate around the team. They own the arena. They own skating rinks or ice plexes or multiplexes where practices happen. They sell ice to kids. They sell their merchandise. They own the rights to the concession. The Winnipeg Jets didn't actually own rights to their own parking, their own building, or their own concession when they left in the 90s like a lot of other teams. They just had to sell tickets and rent a place in a barn. Winnipeg, under owner Mark Chipman and David Thompson, the Chipmans in Winnipeg own car dealerships. They own the arena. They own True North Square around Winnipeg. They own tons of real estate. There is so much vertical integration in Winnipeg that even though the Winnipeg Jets may struggle at times to sell tickets when they're down, and we've seen it, they've had times in the last 2 or 3 years where they've had 2,000 less fans in a 15,000 fan arena. That can hurt a small market, but because Mark Chipman and the rest of his business partners, mostly family and David Thompson, have been pretty smart with the way they've built their businesses, they rent the Winnipeg Arena to concerts. They rent the Winnipeg Arena to their owned Manitoba Moose. They rent the Winnipeg Arena to the Winnipeg Jets. So even if the Winnipeg Jets as an organization may be on the ropes a bit, the arena deals, the real estate deals, the car dealership deals, and whatever deals the Chipman and the Thompsons have in at the time are going to more than make up for the losses of the Jets. So this isn't just a game of selling tickets like it was in the 90s. It's very stable here in Winnipeg and likely in your city as well too. So that being said, people might wonder, why the hell does Phoenix or Arizona even have a team when we're taking a look at things like this? And I'm going to tell you one reason. It's sports team market size. TV deals mean everything. New York is the largest sports team market in the world right now. And take a look at who is number 11. It's Phoenix. 2.18 million people, home of the Suns, the Cards, the D-backs, and the Yotes. But Coach Ryan, the Yotes barely sell any tickets. They're at Mullet Arena. Look, we're not here to drag on Yotes fans. Yotes fans always think I'm dragging on them. I'm not. I drag on the organization, which has nothing to do with the fans. They are separate. Ownership groups there, business to make money. Fan groups there, love every single one of you, passionately screaming in your arena for your favorite teams, producing players like Austin Matthews. Hey, why not? But the reason the Arizona Coyotes are so heavily protected by Gary Bettman is because of TV right deals. When you sell TV rights in the States, and we've seen it with NBC, ESPN, and a whole bunch of other people bidding up as the NHL increases its revenues, we've also seen it here in Canada, that you can actually package up that 2.158 million person market and sell it to increase the price of your asking. So even if Phoenix doesn't sell a ticket, the revenue that is brought in on the TV deals, whether somebody watches or not, is significant for the NHL, which is why Gary Bettman and crew protect that franchise like their life depends on it. And for comparison's sake, the province of Manitoba with 1 million people, as well as Saskatchewan with 1 million people, that is the TV market for Winnipeg, would stack up somewhere around the middle here, if you can actually believe it. Now, not all people in northern Manitoba and Saskatchewan are going to be Jets fans. Heck, even a lot of people in Winnipeg don't end up being Jets fans, but there is a large portion of Winnipeg and its 700 to 800,000 people that are diehard Jets fans. So even with 650,000 fans, they rank above some of the other markets in the world, including places like Las Vegas, Milwaukee, Cincinnati, or even Buffalo. So in short, Winnipeg has a long, rich history. And am I going to sit here and take the fact that we're the worst franchise in NHL history? Absolutely not. Are we the best? Not necessarily. Not yet anyway. Winnipeg is still looking for its elusive first cup, but they sit first in the Central Division right now as we make this video. They sit as the team that has gone the second farthest in Canada, as the Montreal Canadiens have now made it to a Stanley Cup final. The Winnipeg Jets made it to a conference final. All of us in Canada are waiting for a Stanley Cup. It has been a billion years. Somebody go ahead and break that goose egg already, because the narrative is getting old. But I hope I have convinced you there are certain places you need to take a look before we make claims over what is the worst team or worst franchise in certain cities. And in no possible way through this entire dialogue do I see anyone in Winnipeg associating themselves with the worst franchise in NHL history. I don't see us associating ourselves with the Atlanta Thrashers. I don't see us associating ourselves with the Arizona Coyotes, nor do I feel the Arizona Coyotes associate themselves with Winnipeg. Nor should they. You take your pride and your ownership from the city you belong to, the city you've moved to, or the city you were born in. We all find really cool reasons to cheer for the teams that we do. Everybody has a reason to be proud of their franchise or their team. There's no reason to drag anybody else through it. I really like the YouTube video that I saw from Wilder42K. Big shout out to you if you made it to the end of this video. Remember, go take a look at his. Smash the thumbs up button down below. Subscribe to Coach Ryan D for the best in hockey content. And take a look at a couple of these other great videos that aren't opinion pieces, but go ahead and talk about real coaching attributes, such as why is Mitch Marner such a dominant winger in the NHL? Great highlights and clips there for you to sink your teeth into, as well as you can take a look at this video here about the Winnipeg Jets head coach Rick Bowness if you're a diehard Jets fan like Coach Ryan D.